Lisa had been dreaming of this moment for over 10 years. Standing on the front porch of her new ranch house, she could hardly believe it was real. The morning sun painted the rolling hills in golden light, and the only sound was the gentle breeze, rustling through the oak trees. After spending most of her adult life cramped in a tiny city apartment, this felt like stepping into another world. The property was everything she'd imagined and more. 15 acres of pure freedom stretched out before her, complete with natural pastures, a small creek that bubbled along the back boundary, and enough space to finally breathe. The farmhouse itself was a bit rough around the edges, but that just meant she could make it truly her own. She'd already spent 3 months fixing up the place, painting walls, replacing old fixtures, and turning what used to be a storage room into her dream home office. Lisa had stumbled across this property almost by accident. She'd been scrolling through real estate listings during her lunch break at work, just daydreaming really when this place popped up. The photos showed vast open spaces and that beautiful old house, and something inside her just clicked. She called the agent that same afternoon, drove out to see it that weekend, and put in an offer before anyone else could snatch it up. The best part was the price. Because the property was a bit isolated and needed some work, she actually managed to afford it on her teacher's salary. Sure, it meant using up most of her savings and taking on a bigger mortgage than she'd planned, but every morning when she woke up to this view, she knew it was worth every penny. Her nearest neighbor lived about a quarter-mile down the dirt road, an older gentleman named Frank who raised cattle and kept to himself. Perfect. Lisa had always been the type who needed her space and quiet time to recharge. The city had been slowly draining her energy for years, with constant noise, crowded streets, and neighbors who seemed to live right on top of each other. The property came with a small barn that was in decent shape, and Lisa had big plans for it. She'd already bought 3 goats from a farm about 20 minutes away. Penny, Clover, and Buttercup were settling in nicely and provided endless entertainment with their silly antics. She'd never owned livestock before, but the local feed store owner had been incredibly helpful, giving her advice on everything from proper feeding schedules to basic health care. Behind the house, she'd started a vegetable garden that was already showing promise. Tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, and herbs were all growing beautifully in the rich soil. There was something deeply satisfying about growing her own food after years of relying on expensive grocery stores and questionable produce quality. The peace and quiet were incredible. During her first week, Lisa actually found herself checking if her hearing was okay because she was so used to constant background noise. No traffic, no sirens, no neighbors arguing through thin walls. Just birds singing, wind in the trees, and the occasional soft bleating from her goats. She'd set up a little routine that felt like pure luxury compared to her old life. Every morning, she'd make coffee and sit on the back porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky different colors. The goats would wander over for their morning greeting, and she'd spend a few minutes just enjoying their company before heading out to tend the garden. Evenings were just as magical. After a day of working on house projects or maintaining the property, she'd often find herself sitting by the creek with a book, listening to the water flow over the rocks. Sometimes she'd see deer drinking at the water's edge or catch sight of a hawk circling overhead. It was like living in a nature documentary. The only thing that seemed a bit odd was the new development next door. When Lisa first looked at the property, there had been talk about some houses being built nearby, but she hadn't paid much attention. Now she could see that the construction was well underway. They were building what looked like a pretty fancy neighborhood, with big houses and perfectly manicured lawns. The signs at the entrance called it Willowbrook Estates. Not that it bothered her much. The new houses were far enough away that she could barely see them through the trees, and her property had been here long before they started building. According to the county records, her land had been in the same family for over 50 years before she bought it. She actually thought it was kind of nice that the area was developing. Maybe it would mean better roads eventually, or a closer grocery store. The contrast was pretty striking, though. Her property had that natural, lived-in feel with its old wooden fences, meandering creek, and trees that had been growing for decades. The new development looked like something from a magazine, with identical houses, perfect lawns, and streets that curved in neat patterns. Two completely different worlds, side by side. Lisa had met a few of the new residents at the local hardware store, and they seemed friendly enough. They were mostly young families or retired couples who wanted a quieter lifestyle but still liked having modern conveniences nearby. She could understand the appeal even if it wasn't quite her style. Her own style was definitely more rustic. She'd kept the original hardwood floors in the house, even though they showed every scuff and scratch. The kitchen still had the old farmhouse sink, and she'd painted the cabinets a cheerful yellow that reminded her of sunshine. Nothing matched perfectly, but everything felt comfortable and real. Friends from the city had started visiting, and their reactions were always entertaining. Some were amazed by the space and tranquility, immediately understanding why she'd made the move. Others seemed almost nervous about all the quiet and open space, constantly asking about internet service and delivery options. A few had joked about her becoming a crazy goat lady, but she could tell they were a little envious of her peaceful setup. The transition hadn't been completely smooth. Rural internet was definitely slower than what she was used to, and she'd had to learn things like how to maintain a septic system and deal with well water. There was also the matter of being further from everything. Grocery shopping required more planning, and she'd had to find new doctors and services in the nearest town. But those small inconveniences faded away every time she stepped outside and remembered that all of this was actually hers. The rolling hills, the old oak trees, the creek, even the weeds growing wild in the far pasture. It all belonged to her now. After years of paying rent for a tiny space where she couldn't even hang pictures without permission, owning 15 acres felt almost surreal. She'd started taking long walks around the property boundaries just to remind herself of how much space she actually had. The back section near the creek was her favorite spot, especially in the late afternoon when the light filtered through the trees just right. She'd been thinking about maybe putting a small bench there, creating a perfect reading spot for quiet evenings. Life felt full of possibilities in a way it hadn't for years. She was already planning improvements for next spring, maybe expanding the garden, fixing up more of the barn, possibly even getting a few chickens to go with the goats. For the first time in a long time, Lisa felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 3 months into her new life, Lisa was settling into a comfortable routine. Her goats knew her schedule better than she did, and her garden was producing more vegetables than she could eat. Everything seemed perfect until that Tuesday morning, when she walked out to check on the animals and noticed something that made her stomach drop. There were tire tracks in her back pasture, deep ones like someone had driven a heavy vehicle right through her property. The tracks went from the fence line all the way to the creek and back, cutting through the grass she'd been carefully nurturing. Lisa stood there staring, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. There was no reason for anyone to be driving back there, and definitely no permission given. She followed the tracks, getting more confused and angry with each step. Near the creek, she found cigarette butts and an empty coffee cup that definitely wasn't hers. Someone had not only driven onto her land, but had gotten out and made themselves comfortable. The nerve of some people. But that wasn't even the worst part. Walking back toward the house, Lisa spotted something that made her blood boil. Right near her property line, someone had planted a big, bright yellow for sale sign. The sign was advertising lots in Willowbrook Estates, the fancy development next door. The problem was, it was clearly on her side of the fence. Lisa pulled out her phone and called the number on the sign immediately. A cheerful woman answered, introducing herself as Monica from Premier Realty. When Lisa explained the situation, Monica's tone changed completely. "Oh, that must be a mistake," Monica said, though she didn't sound particularly sorry. "I'll have someone come out and move it right away." "You better," Lisa replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I want to know why someone was driving all over my property without permission." There was a pause on the other end. "I'm not sure what you mean about driving. We only placed the sign." Lisa described the tire tracks and the trash she'd found. Monica made some excuse about maybe a surveyor had been out there, but her explanation was vague and unsatisfying. She promised to look into it and hung up quickly. The sign was gone by the next day, but Lisa's unease remained. She started paying closer attention to things around her property, and what she discovered over the following weeks made her realize this wasn't just a one-time mistake. First, it was the business cards. Lisa began finding them scattered around her property, tucked under rocks, stuck in fence posts, even dropped along the path to her creek, all from different real estate agents, all advertising properties in Willowbrook Estates. When she called to complain, she got the same responses every time. "Sorry, must have been the wind. We had no idea those were on your property. We'll make sure it doesn't happen again." But it kept happening. Almost weekly, Lisa would find new cards, or sometimes even full brochures with glossy photos of the houses being built next door. It was like they were using her property as their personal marketing dumping ground. Then came the people. Lisa first noticed them on a Saturday afternoon when she was working in her garden. A well-dressed couple was walking along her fence line. Pointing and talking, when she approached them, they seemed surprised to see her. "Oh, hello," the woman said with a bright smile. "We're just looking at the area. Such a beautiful property you have here." "Thank you," Lisa replied carefully. "But this is private property. Are you lost?" The man stepped forward. "We're working with Premier Realty to look at lots in Willowbrook Estates. Monica told us we could walk through here to get a better feel for the neighborhood." Lisa felt her face flush with anger. "Monica told you wrong. This is my land and you're trespassing." The couple looked genuinely confused, which made Lisa even more frustrated. They apologized and left quickly, but the damage was done. That real estate agent had given them permission to walk on her property without even asking her. Lisa called Monica again, and this time she didn't try to be polite. "You told people they could walk through my property. What gives you the right to do that?" Monica's response was infuriating. "I think there might be some confusion about the property boundaries. Let me check our records and get back to you." "There's no confusion," Lisa snapped. "This is my land. I have the deed. Stay off it." But the intrusions continued. Lisa started finding strange cars parked in her driveway when she came home from errands. When she confronted the drivers, they always had the same story. They were looking at houses in Willowbrook Estates and had been told they could park there. Some even claimed they'd been told the driveway was public access. The most bizarre incident happened on a Sunday morning. Lisa was having her coffee on the back porch when she heard voices. A group of people was walking through her pasture, pointing at her house and talking about development potential. When she marched over to confront them, they seemed shocked that someone actually lived there. "We were told this property was part of the available land," one man explained. "The HOA president said it might be for sale soon." Lisa's jaw dropped. "The HOA president? What HOA president?" "Mr. Crawford from Willowbrook Estates. He's been showing us around the area." This was getting ridiculous. Lisa had never spoken to anyone from the HOA, had never given anyone permission to show her property, and definitely had no plans to sell. Yet somehow people were being told her land was available and being given tours without her knowledge. She decided to install security cameras after finding more tire tracks and discovering that someone had actually moved one of her fence posts. The cameras were expensive, but Lisa felt like she had no choice. She needed proof of what was happening. The footage from the first week was eye-opening. Lisa watched in disbelief as multiple cars drove onto her property. People walked through her pasture taking photos, and one real estate agent actually set up a small table under her oak tree for what looked like a client meeting. The breaking point came when she caught a woman on camera using her garden hose to wash mud off her shoes after tromping through the wet areas near the creek. The woman then picked flowers from Lisa's garden before getting back in her car and driving away. Lisa felt violated and frustrated. This was supposed to be her peaceful retreat, her escape from the chaos of city life. Instead, she was dealing with constant invasions of privacy and people treating her property like it was some kind of public park. When she tried to confront Premier Realty again, she was transferred between 3 different people before finally reaching a manager who promised to look into the situation. But nothing changed. If anything, the intrusions seemed to be getting worse. Lisa began to realize this wasn't just a series of innocent mistakes. Someone was actively encouraging people to use her property, and they clearly didn't care about her rights as a landowner. Her peaceful paradise was turning into a nightmare, and she was going to have to fight to protect what was rightfully hers. Lisa had reached her breaking point, but she wasn't prepared for what happened next. The situation went from annoying to absolutely outrageous when she discovered that someone was actively marketing her property as if it belonged to them. It started when her neighbor Frank knocked on her door one evening, looking concerned. Frank was usually a man of few words, but that night he seemed genuinely worried about something. "Lisa, I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you planning to sell your place?" he asked, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Lisa was confused. "Sell? No, absolutely not. Why would you think that?" Frank scratched his head. "Well, I've been seeing a lot of activity over here lately. Cars coming and going, people walking around with clipboards. Today I saw a man in a suit giving what looked like a tour to some folks. They were pointing at your house and talking about square footage." Lisa felt her stomach drop. "A tour? On my property?" That's what it looked like to me. The man seemed to know a lot about the place. He was talking about the acreage, the creek, even mentioned something about development potential. Lisa thanked Frank and immediately went to check her security cameras. What she saw made her so angry she could barely think straight. Clear as day, there was a middle-aged man in an expensive suit leading a group of people around her property. He was pointing at different areas, gesturing toward the house and even walking them down to the creek. The timestamp showed this had happened just that afternoon while she was at work. These people had been on her property for over an hour, and the man was clearly presenting himself as someone with authority to show it. Lisa decided she needed to confront this head-on. The next Saturday, she positioned herself in her front yard and waited. Sure enough, around 10 in the morning, a black SUV pulled into her driveway. The same man from the security footage got out, followed by a young couple. Lisa marched straight over to them. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" The man smiled confidently, apparently not fazed at all by her presence. "Good morning. I'm Robert Crawford, president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA. I was just showing these potential buyers around the neighborhood." "This isn't the neighborhood," Lisa said firmly. "This is my private property, and you have no right to be here." Robert's smile didn't waver. "Well, I think there might be some confusion about that. This property is surrounded by our community, so it's really part of our overall development area." Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Development area? I own this land, I have the deed. You can't just decide it's part of your development." The young couple looked uncomfortable and started backing toward their car, but Robert continued as if Lisa was being unreasonable. "Look, I understand change can be difficult," he said in a condescending tone, "but the reality is that isolated properties like this don't really make sense anymore. Eventually, this land will need to be incorporated into the community whether you want it to or not. We're just trying to help facilitate that process." Lisa felt her face burning with anger. "Get off my property, now, and don't ever come back." Robert shrugged. "We're not doing anything wrong. We're on what will eventually be community land anyway." He turned to the couple, who were already getting in their car. "Sorry, folks. As you can see, we're dealing with an uncooperative landowner here. But don't worry, these situations usually resolve themselves." After they left, Lisa was shaking with rage. She immediately called the sheriff's office to report the trespassing, but the deputy who came out wasn't very helpful. He said that, unless she had no trespassing signs posted, it was hard to prove criminal intent. He suggested she put up signs and install better fencing. Lisa spent the next week putting up signs around her entire property line. Big, bright, no trespassing signs every 50 feet. She also called a fencing company to get estimates for better barriers. But the intrusions didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. Lisa's security cameras now captured almost daily incidents. Real estate agents were using her property as a backdrop for photos, setting up professional camera equipment under her trees to take pictures of the new houses next door. They would pose clients in front of her garden, her creek, and even her goats. One particularly bold agent had actually set up a small tent on her property with refreshments for potential buyers. Lisa watched in disbelief as people helped themselves to coffee and donuts while discussing lot prices, all while standing on her land. The most infuriating part was how they talked about her property. From the camera audio, Lisa could hear them, referring to her land as future development space and available for the right price. Some agents were telling clients that the current owner was difficult but would come around eventually. Robert Crawford seemed to be the ringleader of all this activity. Lisa's cameras caught him on her property at least twice a week, sometimes alone, sometimes with potential buyers or other real estate agents. He acted like he owned the place, pointing out property features and discussing improvement opportunities. During one recorded conversation, Lisa heard him tell a potential buyer, "The woman who lives here now is just being stubborn. She'll sell eventually when she realizes how much her property is worth as part of our community. We just need to keep showing her the benefits of cooperation." Lisa was beyond furious. These people weren't just trespassing anymore. They were actively plotting to pressure her into selling her home. She felt like she was under siege in her own backyard. The situation escalated further when Lisa discovered that someone had been taking measurements of her property. She found small stakes in the ground with surveyor's tape, and there were fresh marks in the dirt where someone had been using measuring equipment. When she called the county surveyor's office, they confirmed that someone had requested boundary measurements for her property. The request had come from Willowbrook Estates HOA, and they claimed to have owner permission. "I never gave permission for anything," Lisa told the surveyor. "This is completely unauthorized." The surveyor apologized and said they would halt any work immediately, but the damage was done. Someone was actively trying to map out her property without her knowledge or consent. Lisa also started receiving strange phone calls. People would call claiming to be interested in buying her property, offering amounts that seemed too good to be true. When she told them she wasn't selling, they would become pushy, insisting that everyone had a price and that she should at least consider their offers. One caller was particularly persistent. "Ma'am, I represent some investors who are very interested in your property. We're prepared to offer you significantly more than market value. Surely you can't turn down that kind of money." "I'm not interested," Lisa replied firmly. "But you haven't even heard our offer yet. We're talking about enough money for you to buy a much nicer place somewhere else. I like where I am. Look, between you and me, it's going to be very difficult for you to stay there much longer anyway. The area is changing, and isolated properties like yours are going to become more and more problematic. Why not get out now while you can still get a good price?" Lisa hung up, but the calls kept coming. Different numbers, different people, but always the same message. She should sell, and if she didn't, things would become difficult for her. The final straw came when Lisa arrived home, from grocery shopping to find her gate open and multiple cars parked in her driveway. A full-scale open house was happening on her property, complete with balloons, directional signs, and a refreshment table set up on her front porch. Lisa sat in her car for a moment, too stunned to move. These people had turned her home into their personal sales venue without even asking. The audacity was breathtaking. She got out of her car and started walking toward the crowd of people wandering around her yard. It was time to put an end to this madness once and for all. Lisa had finally had enough. Seeing strangers treating her property like their personal showroom was the last straw. She marched straight into the crowd of people who were casually wandering around her yard like they owned the place. "Excuse me, what is going on here?" Lisa announced loudly, her voice cutting through the chatter. The conversation stopped and everyone turned to stare at her. A woman with perfectly styled hair and a clipboard stepped forward with a big fake smile. "Oh, you must be the owner. I'm Jennifer from Sunset Realty. We're just showing some clients the beautiful neighborhood amenities. Your property really adds so much charm to the area." Lisa felt her blood pressure rising. "These aren't neighborhood amenities. This is my private home and you're all trespassing." Jennifer's smile flickered but didn't disappear. "Well, I think there might be some confusion. Mr. Crawford from the HOA gave us permission to use this space for our open house event. He said you were very cooperative with community activities." "Mr. Crawford lied," Lisa said firmly. "I want everyone off my property right now." The potential buyers started looking uncomfortable and began drifting toward their cars, but Jennifer wasn't giving up so easily. "Now let's not be hasty. This is actually a great opportunity for you. Having all these interested buyers see your property could really help you when you decide to sell. I'm not selling, Lisa replied through gritted teeth. Oh, but everyone sells eventually, Jennifer said with that same condescending tone Lisa was getting tired of hearing. Especially when the right opportunity comes along. Lisa pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. You have 5 minutes. To get everyone off my property, or I'm having you all arrested for trespassing. That finally got their attention. Jennifer quickly started ushering people toward their cars, muttering something about difficult property owners and not understanding business opportunities. But Lisa's troubles were just beginning. The next week, she received a letter from the county saying she was being cited for multiple violations. According to the complaint, her property had unsightly farm equipment, improperly maintained structures, and was negatively impacting neighborhood property values. Lisa stared at the letter in disbelief. Her property was well maintained. The farm equipment was just basic tools any rural property owner would have. The structures were old, but solid and properly maintained. Someone was clearly filing false complaints to harass her. She called the county office and discovered that all the complaints had come from Willowbrook Estates HOA. They claimed her property was bringing down the value of their development and creating an inconsistent aesthetic for the neighborhood. The county inspector who came out was actually very reasonable. He looked around the property and shook his head. Ma'am, I don't see any violations here, he told Lisa. Your property is cleaner and better maintained than most places I visit. Someone's wasting my time and yours with these complaints. But the harassment didn't stop there. Lisa started receiving certified letters from law firms claiming that she was in violation of various easements and property agreements that didn't actually exist. Each letter required her to spend time and money consulting with her own attorney to prove they were bogus. Her lawyer, Tom Bradley, was a straight-talking man who'd been practicing property law for 30 years. After reviewing the fourth frivolous legal threat, he was as frustrated as Lisa. These people are trying to wear you down, Tom told her during one of their meetings. They're hoping that if they make your life difficult enough, you'll just give up and sell to make the problems go away. Well, it's not going to work, Lisa said firmly. This is my home, and I'm not being bullied out of it. Tom nodded approvingly. Good, because what they're doing is harassment and we can fight back. But I have to warn you, it's going to get worse before it gets better. He was right. The next escalation came when Lisa discovered that Robert Crawford had been spreading rumors about her around town. She first heard about it at the feed store when the owner, Mrs. Patterson, mentioned it casually. I heard you're having some trouble with your neighbors, Mrs. Patterson said while ringing up Lisa's goat feed. What kind of trouble? Lisa asked. Well, word around town is that you're being difficult about some community development project. Some folks are saying you're holding up progress and hurting property values for everyone. Lisa felt her stomach sink. That's not true at all. They're the ones harassing me. Mrs. Patterson looked sympathetic. I figured there was more to the story. You've always seemed like a reasonable person to me. But you might want to know that some people are talking. Lisa soon discovered that Robert Crawford had been conducting what could only be described as a character assassination campaign. He was telling anyone who would listen that Lisa was an uncooperative neighbor who was standing in the way of community progress. He claimed she was unreasonable and hostile to development that would benefit everyone in the area. The rumors were having an effect. Lisa noticed that some people in town were treating her differently. The clerk at the hardware store, who used to be friendly and chatty, now barely made eye contact. Some neighbors she'd met at community events seemed to avoid her. But the worst part was when the rumors started affecting her work. Lisa taught at the local elementary school, and one day her principal called her into his office looking uncomfortable. Lisa, I've been hearing some things about a dispute you're having with your neighbors, Principal Anderson said carefully. Some parents are concerned about whether this might affect your teaching. Lisa was shocked. My property dispute has nothing to do with my job. I'm the same teacher I've always been. I know that, he said quickly. But you know how parents can be. They hear rumors and start worrying. I just wanted to give you a heads up that some people have been asking questions. Lisa left that meeting feeling sick. These people weren't content to just harass her at home. They were trying to destroy her reputation and her career. The final blow came when Lisa discovered that Robert Crawford and his associates had actually been showing her property to developers. Her security cameras caught a meeting that made her blood run cold. Robert was walking around her property with two men in expensive suits, pointing out different areas and discussing improvement potential. Lisa could hear parts of their conversation through her camera's audio system. The current owner is being stubborn, but she'll come around, Robert was saying. We just need to keep applying pressure. Eventually she'll realize that selling is her only option. One of the developers nodded. What kind of timeline are we looking at? I'd say 6 months, maybe less. We've got several strategies in play. Legal pressure, social pressure, economic pressure. Something's got to work. The other developer asked, what if she continues to refuse? Robert's response chilled Lisa to the bone. Well, there are ways to make rural living very difficult. Zoning, changes, utility issues, access problems. Trust me, we'll find something that motivates her. Lisa realized she wasn't just dealing with pushy real estate agents anymore. This was an organized campaign to force her off her own land. They had a plan, resources, and apparently no moral boundaries. That night, Lisa sat on her porch with a cup of tea looking out at the property she loved so much. Her peaceful paradise had become a battlefield, and she was fighting for her right to exist in her own home. But as she watched the sunset paint the hills in golden light, Lisa felt her resolve strengthen. These people had picked the wrong person to mess with. She wasn't going anywhere, and if they wanted a fight, she was ready to give them one. Tomorrow she would call Tom Bradley and discuss their next move. It was time to stop playing defense and start fighting back. Lisa wasn't going to take this lying down anymore. The next morning, she called her lawyer, Tom Bradley, and told him everything she'd discovered. When she played him the security camera footage of Robert Crawford discussing strategies to force her out, Tom's expression grew serious. Lisa, this is criminal harassment and conspiracy, Tom said firmly. We're not just dealing with property disputes anymore. These people are plotting to destroy your life to get your land. Within a week, Tom had filed a comprehensive lawsuit against Robert Crawford, the Willowbrook Estates HOA, and 3 real estate agencies. The lawsuit included charges of harassment, trespassing, conspiracy, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But more importantly, Tom used all of Lisa's security footage and documentation to file for restraining orders against the worst offenders. The judge who reviewed the evidence was clearly shocked by what he saw. In 30 years on the bench, I've never seen such blatant disregard for property rights, Judge Martinez said during the hearing. These restraining orders are granted immediately, and I'm warning all parties that any violation will result in immediate jail time. The restraining orders were like magic. Suddenly, Lisa's property was quiet again. No more uninvited tours, no more cars in her driveway, no more people trampling through her garden. But Lisa wasn't satisfied with just stopping the harassment. She wanted justice, and she wanted to make sure this never happened to anyone else. Tom had been busy gathering evidence, and what he found was shocking. It turned out that Robert Crawford and his associates had been running the same scheme on other rural property owners in different parts of the state. They would target isolated properties near new developments, then use harassment and legal pressure to force owners to sell at below-market prices. We found at least 6 other cases, Tom told Lisa. Same pattern every time. Harassment, false complaints, character assassination, then lowball purchase offers presented as the only way to make the problem stop. Lisa was horrified. How many people did they force out of their homes? At least 4 that we can prove. But we think there are more who just gave up and sold without fighting back. This discovery changed everything. Lisa's case wasn't just about her property anymore. It was about stopping a criminal enterprise that was destroying people's lives for profit. The story started getting media attention when Tom reached out to investigative reporters. A local news station picked up the story first, running a segment titled, "Rural Property Owners Under Attack." The reporter, Angela Chen, had done her homework and presented a clear picture of the conspiracy. "What we're seeing here is organized crime disguised as real estate development," Angela reported. "These groups target vulnerable property owners and use systematic harassment to steal their land." The news story brought Lisa more support than she ever expected. Her phone started ringing with calls from neighbors, friends, and even strangers who wanted to help. People were outraged by what they'd seen and heard. Frank, her neighbor, stopped by with a casserole and an apology. "Lisa, I'm ashamed to say I believed some of those rumors for a while. I should have known better. You're good people, and what they did to you was wrong." Even more importantly, other victims started coming forward. Lisa received calls from property owners in 3 different counties who had experienced similar harassment. Some had sold their land to make the problem stop, but now they wanted to fight back. "They told me the same things," one caller said. "That my property was bringing down values, that I was being difficult, that I should just take their offer and move somewhere else. I believed them and sold for way less than my land was worth." Tom was thrilled with these new developments. "Every new victim gives us more evidence and more credibility. This is turning into a major case." The legal battle intensified when Robert Crawford and his associates tried to fight back with their own lawyers. They claimed that everything they'd done was legal business activity and that Lisa was just a difficult property owner who couldn't accept progress. But their defense fell, apart when Tom presented months of security camera footage showing clear trespassing, harassment, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. The breakthrough came when one of the real estate agents, Jennifer from Sunset Realty, decided to cooperate with investigators. Faced with serious criminal charges, she agreed to testify about the conspiracy in exchange for a reduced sentence. "Robert Crawford organized everything," Jennifer told the court during her testimony. "He had a whole system worked out. First, we'd start using the property without permission to make the owner feel powerless. Then we'd file false complaints to create legal pressure. Then we'd spread rumors to isolate them socially. Finally, we'd present selling as their only option to make the problems stop." Jennifer's testimony revealed the full scope of the operation. Robert Crawford had been running this scheme for over 5 years, targeting dozens of property owners across multiple counties. He'd made millions of dollars buying properties at below-market prices from desperate owners who just wanted the harassment to stop. The criminal charges came next. Robert Crawford was arrested and charged with conspiracy, fraud, harassment, and racketeering. Several other real estate agents and HOA board members were also charged. The trial made headlines across the state. News outlets called it the Rural Land Grab Conspiracy and the HOA from Hell case. Public opinion was strongly on Lisa's side, especially after people heard the security camera footage of Robert Crawford plotting to destroy her life. During the trial, the defense tried to paint Lisa as an unreasonable person who was standing in the way of legitimate development, but the evidence was too strong and the jury wasn't buying it. The verdict came after just 2 days of deliberation. Robert Crawford was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 5 years in prison. The other defendants received shorter sentences but also faced significant jail time. But the criminal convictions were just the beginning. The civil lawsuit resulted in a massive settlement that included punitive damages designed to punish the defendants and deter similar behavior in the future. Lisa was awarded enough money to completely secure her property and set up a legal defense fund for other rural property owners facing similar harassment. She used part of the settlement to build a proper fence around her entire property and install professional-grade security systems. More importantly, the case resulted in new state laws protecting rural property owners from harassment and making it easier to prosecute organized schemes like Robert Crawford's operation. Lisa also started a support group for rural property owners who had faced similar harassment. The group, called Stand Your Ground, provided legal resources, emotional support, and advocacy for stronger property rights protections. "What happened to me was terrible," Lisa said during a television interview 6 months after the trial. "But if my experience helps protect other people from going through the same thing, then it was worth the fight." Today, Lisa's property is peaceful again. Her goats graze contentedly in the pasture, her garden produces more vegetables than she can eat, and she can sit on her porch in the evening without worrying about uninvited visitors. The gate at the end of her driveway now has a much more direct sign. Private property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But she rarely needs to enforce it anymore. The Willowbrook Estates development next door continues to grow, but under new management that respects property boundaries and follows the law. The new HOA board even sent Lisa a formal apology and a fruit basket when they took over. Lisa has become something of a local hero, known as the woman who stood up to bullies and won. She still teaches at the elementary school, where she's more popular than ever with parents who admire her courage. But, most importantly, Lisa proved that ordinary people can fight back against organized harassment and win. Her peaceful ranch is exactly what she dreamed it would be. A place where she can live freely on her own terms, without interference from people who think they know better. The creek still bubbles along the back of her property. The oak trees still provide shade on hot afternoons, and every sunrise still reminds Lisa that sometimes the best things in life are worth fighting for.